I'd like to welcome everybody today as we come to this momentous day as we are able to finally bring a case to closure of an identity of the Belle and Well. 38 years in the making, a day that most people never thought we would actually see. So throughout the morning you're going to meet some really incredible people that have worked together. Today's day really is a culmination of a lot of hard work, dedication, combined with cutting-edge technology, both new and old, to really bring science to here in Lawrence County. So a great day. We'll start this morning. We'll introduce the speakers and provide the MC this morning. We'll first have the revealing of the Belle's identity, and then I'll bring up Mr. Bill Nenni, the chief investigator on this case. He actually has investigated it from the very beginning, and then the main driving force behind getting us to where we are today. And then bring up Dr. Elizabeth Murray. She's a forensic anthropologist based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and then bring up our team from the DNA Doe Project. And they will be covering how we got to today and the methods they used. So without further ado, we will acknowledge that here's just a little agenda of where we'll be going today. But the Belle and Well has been identified as Miss Louise Virginia Peterson Flesher, Peterson being her maiden name and Flesher being her married name. So I'll bring up Mr. Bill Nenni next to go over the first timeline of the case initially, and then we'll turn things over to the rest of the team.
Good morning. My name is Bill Nenni, and I kind of got roped into this case to begin with. My father was the coroner in Lawrence County for about 40 years, and he would take me out on the different cases, and I learned a little bit each time I went. He had several investigators over the years, and the last one died. And for the next year or so, it was, I kind of went with him to go along with these cases and learn a little bit about them. When the Belle and the Well arrived, or that case came to fruition, came where we could see it, I wasn't there, and no one from the coroner's office was there. And at that point, my dad decided that you will be the investigator. Couldn't find anybody else to do the job, so I guess I turned into the investigator. I did not make a physical examination of the scene, but that was my case. That was my very first case that I was assigned, and I'm glad that we finally get to the point where 38 years later it's been solved. My job right now is to go ahead and establish a timeline just to tell you what's happened and when these things happen. And 1981 was when she was found in a well or a cistern that was in near Dobbston, Lawrence County. McKinney Creek is a very remote area that some girls were playing, and they came upon an old cistern, lifted the top off of it, and found something that they could not identify, but they went back to their dad, and the father decides that maybe we need to get the sheriff's office involved, and that's the beginning of the story. Bright Ridge is actually what that's called. It was a party place where the motorcycle gang at that point would go and drink beer and have parties and such like that. And we always believed that there was a connection to the motorcycle gang. But I think we've kind of dispelled that at this point. She was taken to Franklin County, and an autopsy was performed there. A cause, manner, and mode of death were established, and she was sent back to Lawrence County. I'm going to let Dr. Murray expand on that a little bit more. When she does her part, she can tell you exactly what happened with the autopsy and how it was done and what they found. This is a copy of the original death certificate. You can see up here at the top that there's a bunch of unknowns. We don't know this, we don't know that. We do know that the cause of death was a manual strangulation. And down here you can see where Harry Nenni, the coroner at that time, signed the death certificate. And again, Dr. Beth Murray gets in touch with me somewhere around this time frame. She is a representative for NAMUS at this point, and we together enter her information onto NAMUS, which is a kind of a clearinghouse for unknown and missing persons. And we started the plans to do an exhumation at that point. And then the lights went out. All right, I'll take some help. June 15th of 2011, we disinterred the body, take her back up out of the ground. Lawrence County does not have a morgue now, nor had a morgue at that point, any place to be able to do this investigation. So our neighbors to the south in Kentucky, Boyd County, kindly lent us a place to do the examination. At that point, that facility, we re-examined the body. Dr. Murray will probably expand on this one a little bit more. I'm going to allow her to take care of that. After we finished with the examination, we took her to King's Daughter. We did full body x-rays looking for any kinds of bone breaks or metal pins, braces, things like that that might show up, that might be a easy way to identify her. None of that was there. We did retain the skull and hope to do further investigation at that point. Dental charting was done at the same time, dental x-rays, castings of her mouth, and the three people involved were Dr. Ralph Beadle, who's also an investigator for the Boyd County Coroner's Office, Dr. Barnett, and Leanne Elliott. The biggest thing we found was an overbite that seemed to be confirmed by all the dental people that she had an extreme overbite that you'd be able to identify, and that would be one way to be able to identify her. In 2014, myself and Dr. Murray began talking about the possibilities of identifying her with genealogy and DNA. That was kind of cutting edge stuff at the time, still cutting edge stuff right now. That we saw that there was a possibility that this could be done, but we weren't exactly sure about how to go about it. So Dr. Murray talked again with NAMUS and NIJ about the possibility of these same DNA and genealogy, marrying the two of them together to be able to identify her. In February of 2017, Dr. Murray's at a conference, and meets with genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick. Dr. Fitzpatrick is a speaker at the conference, and she's actually talking about the possibility of identifying people by genealogy and DNA. I remember the day very, very clearly. Dr. Murray left in the middle of the conference. She comes and calls me, and she says, I think we found a person that could help us, a person that could put this together. She was right. She's also pretty good at PowerPoints. So, in February of 2019, the Doe project that you'll hear more about calls me or sends me an email and says, we think we've identified your Belle in the well. Not only did they come up with the name of the person, but they also came up with family members that were possibly DNA donors to do some confirmatory DNA testing. And from that point, I start contacting these people, and the rest of the thing seems to come together at that point. In February then, information from the Doe project allows us to find the daughter and search for the daughter. And then March 15th of this year, we do some DNA testing with the daughter. And that sample was sent to University of North Texas, who did the first part of the testing on the Belle and the well. And that testing, the confirmatory testing, starts then in March of this year. July 3rd, we received a call or an email from the University of North Texas, NANA's labs, confirming the link between the daughter and Louise. And at that point, we're able to make a determination that this is indeed her daughter and that Louise Fletcher is indeed the Belle and the well. So that was confirmed in July 3rd of this year. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Elizabeth Murray, who's a forensic anthropologist, did the early examination, the first examination after we did the disinterment, and has also been extremely can't come up with the word to describe. She's been a real friend to me, and she's been a real help in this case, and together we kind of fought against the odds, and people said, you can't do that, you can't do this, and between the two of us, mostly because of her, I think we found a way.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the autopsy. Bill has given us a nice overview, and so I'm going to fill in some of the details. I happen to know Dr. Paul Jolly. I first started with Hamilton County Coroner's Office as an intern in the mid-'80s, and he was still there, but I wasn't directly involved in this case at the time. And the autopsy report noted that she was a Caucasian female. She was an adult. And there was a lot of soft tissue present, but it wasn't suitable for any type of fingerprinting, so we had no fingerprints for her. There wasn't any kind of hair associated with her head, so she was so decomposed that the hair mass had fallen off and was not recovered from the cistern. So it's not known what color her hair was, nor were her eyes suitable for determining their color as well. She was measured at 63 inches, 5'3" tall, and at that time the autopsy report suggested she was around 100 pounds. They estimated that she was in that cistern for no more than 2 years, so the probable cause, or the probable time since death was somewhere in the neighborhood of 1979 to 1981. The cause of death was manual strangulation, and the manner of death was homicide. So they didn't note any other medical findings, nothing in the autopsy to suggest anything that might help provide an identification for her. They did not perform a dental chart at that time, but Dr. Jolly's father happened to be a dentist, and as the chief deputy coroner, Dr. Jolly was very interested in dentition, so he meticulously assigned a lot of information in the autopsy report about her teeth. And she did have clothing on. She was fully dressed other than shoes. She had on a thin sweater covered by a blouse that was covered by a red cable knit sweater, a very heavyweight sweater. She had on gray slacks, and she had on 2 pairs of socks, a thin pair of socks with an overcovering of a red pair of thick socks. And around her wrist, underneath the clothing, were rubber bands, 2 on one forearm and 1 on the other. So we don't know if anybody who might know her might know, that maybe this was a habit of hers or something like that. Something that Bill Nenni can address further was there was a locker key from a bus station in Huntington, West Virginia, that was in her pants pocket. Now that was not turned over at autopsy. It had already been taken from her when she was autopsied at Hamilton County in Cincinnati. So then Bill talked about this being his first investigation. She was the first case I ever entered personally into the NamUs system. In March of 2009, I was hired as a forensic consultant on the Forensic Sciences Services team for NamUs. And what I was doing was going around to local coroner's offices in Ohio and asking them if they had any unidentifieds that we could enter into the brand new system. NamUs was just founded in 2009. It stands for the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. And I went to Hamilton County and I pulled their records, and not only did they have records from in-county cases that were unidentified, they had numerous records from cases outside of Hamilton County, including this from Lawrence County. And she was physically the first case I personally entered into the system. And then I contacted Bill, and he made the plans for the exhumation because DNA testing, did not come about until the mid-'80s, and I can say from my 30-plus years in forensic science, that it wasn't commonplace in most offices until the early 90s to mid-90s. So I performed an anthropology exam, came over here to the facility that Bill mentioned in Kentucky, and in June of 2011, we did an exam on her. I noted that there was some arthritic changes in her spine. The autopsy report did not give an age other than adult. But it wasn't enough arthritis to suggest an older age. So I put an age range in there of about 30 to 60 years of age. And between Bill and I, we not only thought, but it appeared she had weighed more than 100 pounds that was noted in the original autopsy. So then we took a bone sample, submitted it to the NamUs testing lab, which is at the University of North Texas. And then Bill did her dental charts and x-rays with the local dentist around here. I was able to upload those to the NamUs system. And between Bill and I, 243 exclusions were made between 2009 and the present. So we knew a lot of people that were not this Belle in the Well, but we still couldn't figure out who she was. Bill had forensic art done. The skull had been retained, as you heard. This was one done by someone at the Franklin County Coroner's Office, Jack Sudamak, in 2012. This one looks a little more rough, but it was computerized. It was based on autopsy photos that I provided artist Amy Stump. And she works with Project Eden, which is an acronym for Everybody Deserves a Name. And so her actual autopsy photo is the basis for this computerized reconstruction. And I believe this looked, as similar as we could get at that time. And then in 2018, Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation artist did another clay reconstruction of her. But we will never know that she looked like any of these people because the most recent photo so far we've been able to find is her high school yearbook photo from 1934. Okay, so as Bill mentioned, I was at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences meeting and met Colleen Fitzpatrick. She was giving an evening presentation, and before she was even off the podium, I had written her an email on my phone and suggested that we meet the next day. And one of the lines I remember us talking about is she said, I have the methodology, but I don't have the cases. Well, at that time, I was case manager for about 30 unidentified cases in Ohio, and I said, I have the cases, and we have been looking for you and your methodology. Since at that point, Ohio has become her proving ground because she has resolved, I believe, 6 or 7 cases in Ohio at this time. Five, sorry. I'm being corrected here. Belle was the first case that we selected because of Bill's interest in genealogy and how we had been looking for someone that could do this. But Belle was not the first case solved by the DNA Dope Project. The first one you may have heard of was in April of 2018, the infamous Buckskin girl as Marcia King after 37 years. So now I'll turn this over to the DNA Dope Project, and they'll be able to discuss the actual methodology they use to help us resolve this case. And this is Colleen Fitzpatrick of the DNA Dope Project.
Thank you all for coming out. We are very honored to be here today. I am Colleen Fitzpatrick, one of the co-executive directors of the DNA Dope Project. I'd like to say that, many of the cases you see in the news recently using forensic genealogy, not all of them, but many of them are on the easy side. And I want to say this is a wonderful example of a very difficult case. And it highlights the use of a volunteer team, because we, as volunteers, we had all the time in the world to devote to this project, and that's exactly what we did. It was a very challenging case for a couple of reasons. First of all, when the body was found, it had been in the well for at least a year, maybe 2 years. So as a result, the DNA was degraded, it was very low quantity, and it was contaminated with bacteria. This was in the very early days of the DNA Dope Project, where we had to face this new world of contaminated and compromised DNA. And we did the best we could, and obviously we did quite well. Some of the cases you hear about, especially suspect cases, use fresh DNA, lots of fresh DNA, but this was different. There was another challenge too, and that was the genealogy. It became clear to us in the early stages that Belle came from a very complicated community where families married more than once over the generations. So the genealogy was complex. And I can explain it like this. If I'm doing genealogy and I come up with a full sibling, there's only one way I can be related to that sibling. We have the same parents. If I come up with a first cousin, there's 2 ways that we can be related, either through my mom or my dad. If we're second cousins, there's 4 ways. If we're third cousins, there's 8 ways. So that's a very simple case, but if you live somewhere where the families are more intermarried than that, there's more than 8. If I happen to be related to a cousin maybe 2 or 3 different ways, there could be, who knows, 50 ways we could be related. So you can see that it's very complex when you get to a society or community that, has this long history of marrying into each other for a while. There are many places in the world, in the United States, where this is true. And to complicate things, we have a tool we use called Are Your Parents Related?, which indicates how closely someone's parents might be related, exactly what it sounds like. In this case, when we applied this tool, it turned out Belle's parents were not related to each other, which was kind of surprising. So that meant one of the parents was from somewhere else, maybe a foreign country we didn't know. But as a result, that parent was not represented in the data we had, And we only saw relationships and DNA cousins, so to speak, for one side of the family. The other side was not represented. So, and finally, sorry. Back up. Oh, yeah. And finally, one of the problems was, as we started out, as I said, when you have third cousins, straightforward 8 ways, but in a tangled family, you may have as many as 50 ways. We only had third cousins to work with for the majority of the time we were working. So, we were faced with a very complicated genealogy to work out. The timeline is this. We first started talking about Belle in June of 2017. In August, we were able to get a tooth to go to Bodie Silmark to do DNA extraction and give us DNA to work with. In October, we got the DNA to our sequencing lab to produce the genealogy data, or to produce the DNA we needed to do the genealogy. And then on Thanksgiving Day, 2017, we uploaded that data to GEDmatch, the website, the independent website we had to use to do the analysis. As I said, it was apparent to us that this was not going to be an easy solve at all. In March of 2018, we decided to try another similar analysis to see if we could come up with anything different. This had worked on some other cases, but in this case, we came up with the same thing. And even combining those 2 data sets, it didn't really help. So that's where we were until about February of this year. And I'm going to turn the podium over to Anthony Redgrave, our team captain on this project, and he will explain in a little bit more detail the genealogy and how we were able to finally untangle it and identify Belle as Louise Flesher Peterson.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. So, as Dr. Fitzpatrick mentioned, we realized that many of Louise's genetic cousins shared more than one set of common ancestors. This is something that's called endogamy. Endogamy is the custom of marrying only within the limits of a local community, clan, or tribe. This can happen in religious communities, geographically isolated groups, and indigenous peoples. It's more common than you might expect. So as you can see here, match 4 and match 5 are both third cousins and second cousins once removed with each other. That is because they share 2 different sets of common ancestors, here and here. When a person shares more than a single set of common ancestors, the DNA they share with each other falls within a When a person shares a single set of common ancestors, the DNA they share with each other falls within a predictable range that allows us to make a guess of how they may be related to each other before we ever even build out their trees. When 2 people share more than one set of common ancestors, the amount of DNA they share is less predictable, more than if they shared only one common ancestor couple, making them sometimes appear more closely related than they probably actually are. This, paired with the degraded state of Louise's DNA, made it so that the first year of our research wasn't very clear. We weren't sure of the accuracy of exactly what we were looking at due to the unpredictable nature of the endogamy problem and the degradation of her DNA. In March of 2018 was the first time we spotted Louise Peterson in our trees and found that she would fit right where we would expect to find a person who matched the Belle and Wells autosomal profile. We moved on from her fairly quickly because she was much older than the predicted age range we were given to work with, and we had nothing to support her as a candidate on the paternal side. We continued to look for other places in our trees where someone might have been a better fit. Around the time when people who had received a Christmas gift of an ancestry kit might be receiving their results, a new DNA match appeared on GEDmatch who was not related to the other cousin matches. We knew this person must be from the unrepresented parent side. However, we didn't have any matches that we could use to triangulate a common ancestor with to know where to look. So we had to estimate how many generations back their common ancestor might be, and then work all of the descendancies from each of those ancestors at that level until we found something familiar. This DNA match had a third great-grandfather, Gustav Peterson, who moved with his family from Germany to Canada. Gustav's son, Charles, the DNA match's second great-granduncle, moved from Canada to the US and married Ora Mines, the mother of Louise Peterson. We knew at this moment that when we saw this marriage record come up, that this was the connection we were waiting for. We examined the possibility that Louise may have been the mother of the Belle in the Well because her age range was outside of what was predicted, but upon reviewing the DNA matches for any signs of a genetic connection to Louise's husband, we determined that Louise herself was the Belle in the Well and not one of her children. Ultimately, Louise escaped the endogamy common to her genetic cousins, and several of her top matches do fall within the predicted ranges of shared DNA as compared to their actual cousin relationships. Match one, the only cousin that we have on the paternal side, has no double cousin relationships and is a first cousin 3 times removed to Louise. Matches 2 and 3 are both third cousins once removed. Match 2 is unique and integral to our genealogical analysis because, in addition to the amount of shared autosomal DNA, this match also shares a significant segment on their X chromosome. X DNA can only be inherited through very specific chains from an ancestor. Either it comes from a direct maternal ancestor or through an alternating mother-father chain. In other words, a father can't pass an X chromosome to a son. So that helps us narrow down the focus of what lines of descendancy to look at, because there's only certain ways it can be inherited. So if there's a father-to-father chain, we know that's not the place to look. Since Louise and Match 2 both descend from their ancestors, Edward Grass and Martha Parsons, in a way that would allow them both to share a portion of their X chromosome with each other, that gave us extra assurance that we'd made a positive identification. While we found dozens and dozens of ancestors between Louise's DNA matches, only a handful of those common ancestors were in Louise's direct ancestry. The majority of those common ancestors lived their lives very near to where Louise's remains were discovered. Their birth and death locations are depicted as green tree icons on this map. Before we ever had Louise Peterson as a person of interest, we could already tell that the Belle in the Well was found not far from the home of her ancestors. In fact, the cistern where Louise's remains were found, which is marked here, is only about an hour away from where she lived as a 5-year-old child with her mother and grandparents in West Virginia. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Dr. Margaret Press, who will do the statistics on our case.
Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Bill and Beth, for entrusting your case with us. We're very honored to be here and honored to have worked on her. So I'm going to share some numbers to wrap it up with you. So far, this case has taken us the longest of any of the ones we've solved. We've now solved 12, by the way, since Colleen and I started in February of 2017. In Belle's case, when we were all done, there were about 43,000 names in the combined tree that included Belle and all of her matches. So they weren't all of her family tree. The number of DNA cousins that we actually ended up researching thoroughly was about 180, a little over 180. These are people that showed up on her GEDmatch list that we had to then figure out who they were and what their family tree looked like. Since most people on GEDmatch don't actually put their trees there. So that's where we have to become little detectives and figure out who they are online. Overall, we had probably about 30 volunteers over the 14 months. Half of our group spent time at one point or another on this case. And they put in, it's very hard to estimate, probably over 10,000 hours. So now I'm catching up here. And overall, by the time we were done with the second round of sequencing, we had put in about $3,400 in just the lab fees and the extraction from the tooth. This is not like a $79 ancestry test that you can take. So from the beginning of when we first got that tooth sent off to, when we first uploaded the case to GEDmatch in November, it took us a little over 14 months to solve the case. So it was a couple of other numbers I want to mention. This was, as we were saying earlier, our 5th solved case in Ohio alone. This is more than any other state in the country. As I said, we've solved 12 to date, but Ohio seems to be our lucky state. So a couple of other numbers I want to mention. In May, GEDmatch, which is the database that we depend on for all of our work, we also now use family tree DNA to a certain extent. In May, they changed their terms of service and decided to have the 1 million users in the database automatically opted out from law enforcement research unless they specifically log back in to their accounts and change their account to opt in. To date, about 100,000 people have done that. That's about 1/10 of the database. But that meant that on May 18th, Belle in the Well, who the previous day had 35,000 matches, went to 0 matches. Luckily, we had solved her by this time. If we had not, we would not be able to today because all of our top matches have not yet opted in. Mostly people don't know that they need to do this. They never log back onto their account again. But hopefully word will spread and more people who have done testing will decide to upload to GEDmatch and opt in so that more of our cases can be solved in the future. Oh, sorry. I need to go back to this all-important screen here. We have so many people we want to thank. In addition to being entrusted with the case and support and help of both Bill Nenni and Beth Murray, our labs we're very grateful to. Of course, Bodie Selmark did the extraction from the tooth initially. Then Dr. Weining Tang from AMD Research did the whole genome sequencing for us, creating the data file that we needed. Justin Lowe of Full Genomes Corporation contracted with Dr. Gregory Magoon of Airdyne Research. He created the GEDmatch compatible file for us, which is a bunch of work. GEDmatch itself, founded by John Olson and Curtis Rogers, without which we would not be solving any does at all. And of course, all of our dedicated volunteers who put in so many hours. Also, Belle's matches, some of them were very cooperative. The distant matches that we contacted because we were stumped trying to figure out their trees, really wanted to help us. It was heartwarming to see how many took her on as their own relative, so to speak. And then, of course, our generous donors. We have so many people who are chipping in and making cases like this workable, who help support us financially. And with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Ben. Thank you all very much.
So I'm actually going to turn things over back to Mr. Nenni. Nenni to go over a little bit about what we know about who Louise Peterson Fletcher was and is, and he'll kind of give an update as to what we know about her through various sources.
This is Louise's timeline and what we do know about her. Those of you that are genealogists have looked these things up on the ancestry websites, and you can find some of the stuff that we're going to present. Her birth certificate, we found the birth certificate. I say we, I didn't have a lot to do with it. I was the recipient of it. Our genealogists are the ones that came up with all this information. She was born June 16th in West Virginia in a town of Fairview that I'm not familiar with, but that's what her birth certificate said. By 1933, she was living in Casper and Cheyenne. She has a first daughter in 1936, second daughter in 39, and a third daughter in 1940. The third daughter is the source of the DNA that we use to conclusively identify her. By 1944, she returns back to Parkersburg, and she's living in Parkersburg. And for those of you that are ancestry buffs, city directories, census data, things like that, confirm the places where these people live. And she's there at least until 1956. 1959, she has a daughter die in West Virginia, again by a death certificate. 1979 and 1981, we know that, or we guess that she dies in that time frame. Interesting enough, to go along with this, I tried contacting the Social Security office. I have evidence. I have some other family members that told me that she lived in the Las Vegas area for some time, and that she leaves somewhere in this time frame, 1979 to 81, and goes back to West Virginia, or they think she goes back to West Virginia. At that time, she's receiving a Social Security check, and the nephew tells me that they received several Social Security checks, that they didn't know what else to do, they didn't know where to forward it, they didn't know what else to do with it, so they kept those checks. After some time, those checks quit arriving. So I think she's getting easier than this. You go to the Social Security office, you tell them you need to see her records and find out when the checks went uncashed, and then we've established the time frame. Unfortunately, a federal subpoena doesn't get anything from the Social Security office, and they are not about to cooperate until they have a death certificate with Louise's name on it, which fortunately they'll have here just at some point. And we think we'll be able to establish then the time frame that she left the Las Vegas area, and exactly where she was in Las Vegas, or in the Nevada area, I guess I should say. Potential ties to other locations. Her husband is Donald Benjamin Fletcher, and he died in 1992 in Belle. Those of you that are writing all this stuff down, we have some press releases that we'll give you at the end of the presentation that have all the information that's up here. I see you. Somebody probably should have told you a long time ago that you were going to get one of those, right?
Thank you.
Nope, sorry. I bet I can't go. Thank you. There's additional family connections and siblings, half-siblings and mother. We have other areas that we're able to identify that she had something to do with in Oregon, the Las Vegas, Nevada area, and some places in Colorado. So we think she's been to most of those places. We feel like somebody probably knows her. I think it's sad that all we can come up with is a 1935 graduation picture. If you do the math, she was 65 years old when she went into that well. Dr. Mack, we have several people that need to be acknowledged, a list of people. I'm going to let him take care of that.
Again, I just want to thank everybody for all their contributions. First and foremost, the DNA Dope Project and all the great technology and hard work and effort and countless hours that went into this. Of course, I want to thank God and for giving us the great technology and blessing our great county. I want to thank Beth Murray and all of her incredibly hard work and being a spearhead behind all of these cases throughout Ohio. And Bill Nenni being the workhorse behind all of this here locally. Other folks from our office that are here, Chief Investigator Drew Artis is with us today. We've got other local folks here. Ryan Evans is here representing the Attorney General's office. We've got multiple folks from the Ohio State Patrol. We've got Aaron Bollinger here. He was both the investigators here were actually part of the exhumation process, and I believe we're actually down getting dirty that day. Dr. Burton Payne is here. He was actually county coroner from 1989 to 2009. Jason Newman, the other Lawrence County Sheriff's Office detective. We've got Barry Atkins, he's also an investigator with the prosecutor's office. Commissioner Colton Copley is here with us. Jason Stevens, our county auditor. We got his wife Julie Stevens representing the U.S. Congressman Bill Johnson's office. We've got Leanne Zirkle from the dental team, and I've got to thank my family as well for dealing with me and getting this all set up this past week. As you know, we're a very small county coroner's office. You're looking at our team here minus one person. So we've done a lot this week and don't really have an office, but we'll be getting one in the next couple of weeks, moving into the new joint task force office here in Cold Grove in the next couple of weeks. Next I'm going to bring up, as we officially turn over from the coroner's office into the more continued investigative role, Sheriff Jeff Lawless, and his approach is how you can submit information if you have any about Louise Peterson, or Louise Peterson Fletcher, any information you have about her, you can submit any potential family photos or information you have about her. Sheriff Lawless will talk about how you can submit that, his investigative approach. And also Dave Markham, Chief Investigator for the Lawrence County Prosecutor's Office, will come up as well. And that's it from our office.
Wow, this is an incredible time. I started at the Sheriff's Office in 1986, so this was just before I started. But when you start at the Sheriff's Office, this is one of the cases that you talk about year after year after year, and you always want to find out who this person was. We just never knew. When we were approached years ago about exhuming the Belle in the well, that was a big undertaking, and then again, my detectives in the coroner's office put a lot of effort into obtaining the bodies so that we could get the DNA off of. So we were, really don't leave any case unsolved. So I applaud Bill Nenni. Bill Nenni really has not let this case go from day one. And had it not been for Bill Nenni, we wouldn't be standing here today. So I applaud you, Bill, for all your hard work and everybody's efforts into this. Today's technology, I don't know how anybody gets away with anything. Now, we haven't solved the murder, and we certainly would hope to. A murder case is, it doesn't have a statute of limitations, so it will go on until, we would find somebody to bring to justice. Now, the amount of time that's passed by, the lack of evidence and that type of thing may prevent us from ever knowing who actually killed this lady, but this case is certainly still open. Anybody that has any information about this lady, about the timeline, if you remember her being, coming back from Vegas, being in our area, who she hung around with, or any information at all, we would certainly like you to contact the sheriff's office at the phone number listed, and or you can email us at the help the sheriff at lockdownsco.com. So we would appreciate any information from anybody. Again, there's so much time has passed, and this thing happened at such a long time ago that will we ever know who committed the murder? I don't know. I never thought we would know who this lady was, and that's kind of the fruition. So that it's possible the case is again open until we do bring someone to justice. Thank you.
I'm David Markham, Chief Investigator for Prosecutor's Office. First time I really learned about this case was probably in the early 2000s when Bill had actually come into my office, had several lists of people that he was trying to identify or rule out actually in the case. And there was a lot of effort put in on his part over the years, just the people that it could have been, the process of elimination just for so long. And I spoke about that, and that's when I really became interested in the case and first learned of the case. To think that we would ever be successful in identifying her was just really slim. Obviously, the case is so old that the prosecution is just extremely unlikely. However, we can still encourage and provide any assistance in the search for the truth. I'd sure like to know all the facts and anything that we can about Louise and how she actually came to be there. Well, I appreciate the hard work and dedication of everybody that was involved in this. Thank you.
So we'll open up to a few questions here in just a second, but before that, since we have a team from California, Cincinnati, others from all over the state, I'd like to have everybody just come up for a quick photo opportunity, and then we'll open up to some questions. If our dream team could come on up, please.
Bill, do you think that there's any possibility of any remnant DNA from the murderer? We know she was strangled, soft tissue all gone, or is there a possibility from around the deck, or fingerprints could be identified from that, or is that sort of a hopeless rabbit hole?
I think, given the condition, especially that we saw her when she was exhumed in 2011, and knowing that they couldn't even obtain her fingerprints in 1981, she was fairly far gone. For Dr. Jolly to say she'd been in that well for as much as 1.5 to 2 years, she had soft tissue, but it's what is known as advocere, grave wax as it's sometimes called. And to my knowledge, I don't think that that would be a possibility at this point.
In the DNA that you're talking about, you said that you weren't able to identify the other side because there weren't enough matches.
Yeah.
Where was that other side from?
He was from Germany. Father was from Germany through Canada. The family came to Canada, and then he married someone else.
So her father's DNA was from Germany.
Yeah, we had some
Okay.
distant matches from Germany,
Yeah.
very distant. So there was some kind of, thought that that's where he was from.
But the rest of the DNA showed up in this
We didn't
area.
know if it was the mother's side or the father's side that we
Gotcha.
wanted catching. But that emphasizes the fact that the databases are heavily Caucasian European. He's had some best genealogy. And when you have somebody who's an immigrant, a recent immigrant, or a family who's a recent immigrant, it makes it harder, to work. Although we have been successful with those whose parents were from South America and the UK. And South America, UK, and Canada. So, don't rule it out because it makes it harder. And in this case, it did take us a while. And that one match that kind of nailed the father's side, we already had the other parent pretty well mapped out. But then that connected both parents, which led us to that.
Can we go back quickly to the key that you found for the locker at the bus station, was that locker ever accessed? Was there information that came out of that? Or is that something that you'd rather not say in this press conference?
The original files, we've been unable to locate. I think that there was indeed a key to a bus locker that was in her pocket on her body at some point. There were 2 investigators for the sheriff's office at that time that worked on this case, and I interviewed them probably 10 years ago or so, and I took down the notes from each of those people as I interviewed them, and there are some items that they are diametrically opposed, that their recollection of exactly what happened are completely different. One of those investigators is dead today, so all we have to go on is exactly what I found. One of the investigators says that they took the key back to the bus station. They opened the locker. They found a bunch of clothing. They found a bunch of family pictures. The person at the bus station remembered who put things in the locker, and that whoever this was had bus tickets from Arkansas or somewhere in the South. The second investigator says that when they went back to the bus station, that as a matter of routine, the bus station would, after 60 days, 30 days, some amount of time, that the bus locker wasn't open, that they would open the locker, take the contents out of it. If there were gold bars in there, they'd keep the gold bars, and if there was just junk in there or they didn't know what to do with it, they would throw it away. And that whatever was in there did not exist any longer, and it was gone. I find it very hard to believe that there were family photographs in there that we didn't publish and say, you know, does anybody know any of these people? So I guess there are 2 opposed views of exactly what was in that bus locker. I developed more leads.
Let me ask you this another way. As we're talking right here and now, are there suspects in this case that have been identified?
Sure.
Not that we can name anything. Again, like Bill said, this is an open case, and we're looking at everything and everybody that was associated with her during that time period. You know, at this point, everybody's a suspect, and until you narrow it down. But this case, I don't want to give any hope that it'll ever be solved. You know, there's been a lot of time and effort put into identifying Louise, but probably most of the players involved are deceased at this point. But again, the case is open, and we'll look at anything that has bearing on it.
So no suspects. I mean, obviously you can't say, okay, you know, John Smith, you know, no suspects.
That is correct.
Related to that, because I work in the realm of the unidentified, often the name of the individual is a big clue toward the investigation. So I guess I want to make a plug for NamUs in that if there are any other agencies out there hearing this that have unidentifieds, please contact me or contact Bill, contact the local coroner's office, sheriff's office, because getting them into the NamUs database provides an avenue then, and we have done exhumations, and now we've worked with the DNA Dome project. So I think it's really important, and as Margaret said, you know, if you know anybody who's missing, if you are aware of a case that's an unidentified, these are the steps that we have to take to advance those cases before it is too late, before we don't have any possible suspects. So I just want to put a plug in for that. Thanks.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
At the time, rumor had it that she was found with a rope around her neck with a cinder block. Was that a rumor or any proof to that?
I think that's verified in the autopsy that there was indeed some kind of ligature around her neck tied to a concrete block to weight the body down so it stayed underneath the water.
Well, how does that correlate with manual strangulation?
The manual strangulation probably occurred first. I don't know that there was any differentiation.
No, I agree. Just what Bill said, that the cinder block was present at autopsy. I've seen pictures of it, and could have been used to weight the body down after death.
Any other questions? Elizabeth and I are going to log on to NamUs and officially close this case.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. You've been watching Ohio University's hosting of the Lawrence County, Ohio Coroner's Office press conference concerning the Belle in the well and the identity of the woman who has now been identified as being the victim of a murder, a gruesome, grisly scene. Progress made. Thanks for watching. This presentation brought to you by All Points, sponsored by David Lucas Communication, Ironton, Ohio.